Close your eyes for a minute and go on a journey with me. Imagine yourself on a brisk autumn night lying on a cold, hard sidewalk wrapped only in a cheap Walmart sleeping bag. The year is 2008. America is in the midst of an epic market collapse. YouTube hadn't invented Logan Paul yet, and most importantly, dinosaurs still roam the earth. I think. I don't remember how long ago 2008 was, but that seems right. There you are, on that sidewalk, camped outside a GameStop waiting for its doors to open so that you can be the first to rush in. Because tomorrow, Wrath of the Lich King, World of Warcraft's second expansion, releases. The air around you is still, the silence only broken by the occasional passing car and the other white men around you, yelling about which class is best and saying a racial slur if anyone plays a Ret Paladin. And even though everything should be terrible, you're excited, because the world of MMOs is about to change forever. Oh, I have to make the rest of the video, don't I? At this point, World of Warcraft was already the biggest MMO by far. We already had World of Warcraft on mainstream TV. But 2008's Wrath of the Lich King propelled World of Warcraft to the immortal status that it holds still to this day. The game peaked in subscribers at 13 million plus and solidified its status as the greatest MMO of all time. And all of this happened because of an expansion. So you might think that expansions are this really cool thing that happens in the MMO world that progresses a story forward, releases big new land masses to be explored, and that's true, but I think they're actually doing more harm than good. Hey, I understand, that's a pretty bold claim to make. I mean, MMOs have been doing expansions since the very first MMOs. Ultima Online from 1998 released its first expansion in 1999, and Everquest released its first expansion in 2000. Expansions were like drugs. Everyone's doing them, and if you're not doing them, you're not cool. We're past the 30-second mark in the video. I can make drug jokes, right? But it's like your mom once said to me, if every kid jumped off a cliff, would you jump off that cliff? I mean, I would. There has to be a reason everyone's jumping off that cliff. But one game back then didn't jump off that cliff. One game stood at the top of the cliff and said, no thanks. That game was called RuneScape. RuneScape did something that I call the constant update model. There were no expansion packs, there was no DLC, there was none of the classic MMO stuff we had seen from all of its predecessors. This meant whenever an update was released, you just got access to it without having to pay $20 or $40 or $60 on top of your subscription fee. But if expansions are the way that 95% of MMOs run, they're probably better than the constant update model, right? Wrong. Can you read the title? And I also said earlier, come on, keep up, let's go. As president of MMORPGs, I believe it is my duty to educate the public on my opinion. But remember, my opinion is fact, because that's what it means to be president. And the way I see it, the expansion model is hurting MMOs these days, and it's hindering the lifespan. But don't worry, I'm gonna tell you why, and it's only gonna take me the amount of time that it says down there, so give me a second and I'll prove myself right. To make this video, I obviously had to play a bunch of MMORPGs, but unfortunately doing that made me die of starvation. And that's because I'm too lazy to cook. Oh, what's this package? A Factor 75 package? Today's sponsor? Yes! Factor is perfect for people like me who want to be healthy but just can't find the time to cook. With Factor, you can skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too. But you still get all the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. You can choose from 35 plus weekly flavor-packed meals that promote a healthy lifestyle and meet your meal preferences. I personally decided to try this black pepper and sage pork chop, and let me tell you, if I had a sense of smell, it would have smelled great. And trust me when I say you are not sacrificing flavor when making these meals. They are so good. Like, this pork chop was amazing. And after I was done eating, the only dish I had to do was the plate. If you want fresh, quick, and healthy meals, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code IDLE50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. And thank you again to Factor for sponsoring this video. I'd also like to give a shout out to all my supporters on Patreon. There'll be more about them at the end of the video, but if you'd like to support, you can do so at the link in the description. Welcome students to your first day of Expansions Ed. This is where we're going to learn how to practice safe expansion, which you're going to participate in with your peers, and you might even get peer pressured into doing. So it's just important to stay safe and take these tips seriously. I'm your teacher, Mr. President, but you can call me Goop. First things first, what is an expansion? You see, class, when a man and a woman love each other very much, they get really close together and they hug super tight, and then 9 months later, a major change in the form of either a new landmass, a new boss, new raids, new classes are added to an MMORPG. We call these large additions expansions. Expansions normally change at least one or two things about how the MMO fundamentally works, and will also progress whatever story the MMO is telling forward. That's often the appeal of the most popular expansions that have been released. Telling a self-contained story or wrapping up a major storyline will build a lot of hype for the expansion and usually sets it off on a pretty good note. I mean, half the hype about Wrath of the Lich King was just the fact that it was wrapping up the Lich King storyline, which Warcraft players have wanted for years at that point. But it's important to remember when going into an expansion to wear protection. I personally recommend this old-timey scuba suit that you might recognize from movies like Finding Nemo. And if any of your friends brag that they need to wear a Magnum scuba suit because they're so big, it's basically the same size. It's just a marketing tactic by the scuba suit companies. They want to get more money out of you. Kind of like MMO devs when they make expansions. Mr. President, I have a question. Please, call me Goop. Okay, Goop, I have a question. Sure, little boy, go ahead. It sounds cool to get all this new content, but I'm confused. You have to pay to get the new content when you're already paying a subscription service? That's exactly right. It's a consequence of what we in the business world call capitalism. But what company could possibly come up with this idea? Hey boss, I totally completed that new continent for the first expansion to our game Ultima Online. I developed the whole thing while looking at the Twin Towers, which are still standing because it's 1998. Ah yes, another great job, Richard. And you're British, which is why you sound like that. Our players will surely be so excited by this new continent, as will current President Bill Clinton. Hold on, boys, we can't just release this for free. How am I gonna get enough money to go see Saving Private Ryan, which just came out? But boss, it's not free. Players are already paying $10 a month, which is like $19 in 2023, I assume. Well, I suppose we can make players buy the expansion on top of the existing subscription fee. I like the way you think. Now I'm off to go listen to the #1 song on the Billboard charts 1 week by the Bare Naked Ladies. Well, hold on now. Here's another idea while we're cooking. What if we offered players items and experience in exchange for real world money? They'd be like transactions on a smaller level. We'd have to come up with a name for it, of course. Now that's just a step too far for Electronic Arts. We're a leading game publisher. We would never stoop so low. Despite the added cost, MMO fans still love expansions, and I can totally understand why. Large content updates coming all at once are so exciting for an MMO, and they can really reignite that passion that players have for the game. I mean, I know so many World of Warcraft players who don't actively play the game on a daily basis, but when there's a new expansion, they'll buy it on release day and play it for a solid few weeks. That's just the kind of hype that a new expansion can generate for an MMO. Yes, these videos of people rushing into GameStop to get Wrath of the Lich King are a little bit funny, but they're also really great memories for those people. Everyone rushing to buy the game and then log in at the same time and exploring it all together is what MMOs are kind of about. So when a good expansion is released, there really is nothing better. But that's the kicker. When a good expansion is released. There are a lot of bad expansions that have been released in the 20 plus years of MMO's history. And when you're making large sweeping changes to a world that people love, if you don't do a good job, you're going to make a lot of people very angry, and it can be hard to undo those changes. That's why it's important that MMO devs who are designing an expansion be very careful when touching existing content or overhauling existing systems. This kind of stuff requires a delicate touch, a bit of finesse, like surgery, where you want to make sure you cut just the right parts and add just the right little bits. I don't know how surgery works. I'm not a surgeon. despite these fingers. I think a great example of this delicate touch to existing content comes in the form of World of Warcraft Cataclysm, where a fucking dragon ends the entire world and scars the land, irreparably damaging all the places players knew and loved. Which was super cool because it removed any sense of nostalgia for returning players and basically left the game in a state that would always be remembered as post-Cataclysm and pre-Cataclysm. Sorry, did I say that was a good example? I meant it was a terrible example. But the world-destroying Cataclysm touched more than just the appearance of the world. It also overhauled some systems that players really loved back then. It's not like the expansion at the time was received particularly poorly, but just looking back, it is the turning point for a lot of WoW players. But hey, to be fair, a lot of other games have released bad expansions too, so let's take a look at some of those. If I mention an MMORPG or expansion that you really love, I'm sorry, but these kind of seem stinky to me. Lord of the Rings Online Helm's Deep. What could go wrong introducing one of the most famous battles from the books and movies into an MMORPG so all the players can play through it and really enjoy it and immerse themselves? That seems like a great idea. Nothing can possibly go wrong. What's that? It ruined the game and players have not felt the same about it since. Oh no! I feel like saying it ruined the game is dramatic.
No, the expansion killed the game. But people still play the game, and the expansion came out in 2013. No, filthy expansions is, hey, ruin the game, be dramatic. But the Battle of Helm's Deep was still fun to play through. The expansion had microtransactions, you must make fun of it.
Can we just not make fun of my Gollum impression? I've been working really hard on it. The Helm's Deep expansion deeply changed and added to core parts of the game. The biggest appeal was a system called Epic Battles, which introduced, wait for it, Epic Battles. Did you get it right? Give yourself 1 point if you got it right. The one most players cared about was obviously the Battle of Helm's Deep, the most epic of battles. There's a slight problem in allowing players to participate in an epic battle that has a determined outcome. It can make it kind of hard to feel like your contributions matter if the good guys always have to win. But from what I've seen, they did do some stuff to make that a little bit better with a merit system, so I'll give you that one, Lord of the Rings Online, but I won't give you moving to the trait tree system. Lord of the Rings Online moved to what's called a trait tree for the class system, and this removed a whole set of hybrid play styles from the game entirely. And if removing a popular way to play the game wasn't bad enough, it also added a butt ton of microtransactions. Do you want more character specialization slots? You gotta pay for it. Do you want more player-owned housing storage? You gotta pay for it. I'm just really not a fan of using an expansion to add more microtransactions. It feels scummy, and people are already paying for the expansion, so like, what are we doing here? Star Wars Galaxy New Game Experience. Yep, this one's not an expansion, but it came out 2 weeks after an expansion, so I'm counting it. The Star Wars Galaxy New Game Experience was an attempt to improve everything about Star Wars Galaxies, from the combat to the classes to everything. And by improve, they meant make it World of Warcraft. This system changed the relatively simple combat into a reactive first-person shooter style combat system. I know that's not like World of Warcraft, but this next part is. Star Wars Galaxies used to have over 30 professions, which are basically their version of classes. After the New Game Experience, though, they consolidated those 30 professions into 9 classes. For those of you who are good at math, you'll know that 30 does not equal 9? So if our math is correct, some professions did not have a counterpart in the form of a class. Why are we removing ways people play games? That's not the point. This change was considered by many what killed Star Wars Galaxies. But luckily this change was so disastrous that no MMO company could look at it and then think, hey, we should revamp our entire combat system too, thus alienating all of our players who liked our combat system and making our game basically unrecognizable. No company would ever do that again. No company would ever do that again.
Hello.
Everquest, the gates of Discord. Meow. I've never played Everquest, but a lot of old bald white men have, so I feel like I'm an expert. What I have to say on this is not going to mean a lot, because again, I never played it, but on every single list of terrible expansions I could find, this was on there. All you need to know is that one of the founders of the company that made EverQuest publicly apologized for this expansion, and that's like not a good sign. It was like when Square Enix apologized for the original Final Fantasy XIV, and that game also sucked, so it's like, It's rare. The most egregious thing I could find about this expansion is that they promised a level cap increase from 65 to 70, and then they didn't. They just didn't do that. It didn't happen until the next expansion. Hey man, every game company has had that happen where it's like, we want to introduce this feature, we're gonna have to patch it in later. But I've never seen it where it's like, hey, pay for this expansion and we're not going to give you the level cap. The level cap increases are important. How did this not happen? As a little added bonus, the expansion was considered wildly difficult, and not so much in a fun way, but in a how am I supposed to do this way. The wide conspiracy theory about this is that all the content was tuned to level 70 characters, but no one could get to level 70 because they didn't increase the level cap. And if that conspiracy theory has any truth to it, yuck. But the really gross thing about this expansion has nothing to do with this expansion. Did you know that Everquest released expansions every 6 months? How are you supposed to keep up with that? Not only from a gameplay perspective or from a development perspective, but from a money perspective. These expansions were like $20. $20 every 6 months on top of a $15 a month fee to play the game? With my quick math, I don't even think anyone could afford that ever in the history of mankind. Maybe if we pull our money together. Every WoW expansion except for your favorite. I don't know, when I talk to World of Warcraft people, they all say that the expansions suck except for one, and it's just whichever one they like the most. So like, I guess they're all bad, but they're also like all good. Except for Warlords of Draenor. Everyone seems to hate that one. Either way, one common thread that ties all of these bad expansions together is the devs trying to do too much. But why do they do too much? It's very simple, actually. If each expansion is supposed to tell this epic story or add this huge new landmass or big new raid boss, then every expansion is going to have to continue raising the stakes. And you can only raise the stakes so much. It reminds me of Legend of Korra Season 2. That's right, I have other interests outside MMORPGs. I'm an adult. I can do adult things like watching cartoons if I want to, and you can't stop me. Season 1 of Legend of Korra was pretty cool. It had this big bad guy who could steal people's bending, which is just their magic system. Although I would hope you would know that, because Avatar The Last Airbender is the greatest show of all time, and if you don't know what bending is, you haven't watched it. Why haven't you watched it? So the showrunners had to ask themselves, how do we top this villain in season 2? And they did it by having a giant laser fight in the ocean that determined the fate of not only the plane of existence that they lie on, but all planes of existence ever. And it was really bad, and also MMOs are really bad. I forget what point I was making. So if developers keep trying to raise the impact that each expansion has, either through the story or gameplay mechanics, you're going to see a decline in the quality of those expansions, and you're also going to see the heart of the game slowly fade away. And all of that leads to the game eventually becoming unrecognizable to the people who love it. Going back to Cataclysm, it had such world-altering cataclysm that the game just could not be the same. It made a huge difference if you started playing the game after Cataclysm or before, and it's kind of weird to have an experience that's so dissonant. But luckily, those of us who didn't play World of Warcraft back then can now experience what it used to be like thanks to classic servers, because we thought we wanted it, and it turns out we did.
You don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
Speaking of new player experiences though, a ton of expansions can make things really confusing for new players. Like a couple of months ago, I purchased Dragonflight to play World of Warcraft retail with a friend, but when I loaded it up, I was put into Battle for Azeroth, and I knew nothing about the WoW expansions or the story. I just wanted to play World of Warcraft with my friend, but apparently Battle for Azeroth is like important or something, so I was forced to play through it. And that's what I had to do? But if you wanted to play an MMO that doesn't have expansions with a friend, you can do so with no problems. But are there any MMOs that don't do expansions? Yes, of course there are! I mentioned one at the beginning, you doofus! Oh, hold on, I'm getting a call. Yep. But they deserve it. All right. Apparently I'm not supposed to belittle my audience anymore, so, hey, you look good, I guess. Since RuneScape was released in 2001, it has released updates almost every single week. These updates could be as small as bug fixes or quality of life changes, or as big as brand new land masses to explore, new raids, new bosses, new skills. And they all came at no extra cost to the players. When they were released, you could play them. Mr. Goop, aren't there sequels to RuneScape, like RuneScape 3? What happened to your voice? How'd you get back in here? Am I in the classroom again? What is happening? Well, what that strange little boy said was true. There are sequels to RuneScape, but we have to go a little bit deeper to understand what that means. So welcome to RuneScape Ed, where I teach you about safe habits when practicing RuneScape with your peers. That's right, I'm recycling the bit. RuneScape is one game that has 3 versions, not counting the old school version released in 2013 that is a snapshot of the 2007 version of the game, and it also has the RuneScape Classic version, which is shut down now, but used to be a snapshot of the 2003 version of the game. So hopefully that clears things up, right? Like, we got it? All right, well, if you're still confused, we're gonna have to go back in time to 2001. Oi, bruv. I made a game. I call it RuneScape. Cheers, Governor. I'm proud to have you as a brother, Andrew, and I'm proud that the Twin Towers are still standing, cause it's only January. Gee whiz, I've made quite the company, but my game still looks like it did back when the Concorde was making commercial flights, and those ended last year. Perhaps we make the graphics better and call it RuneScape 2. We'll transfer all the character data so no one pays anything extra or loses any progress. Plus, you know it's been 3 years since 9/11. We're due for a change. Whoa, that's a great idea, Paul, my brother, but could you stop mentioning 9/11 so much? Well, I have you, Andrew. I believe I found our next composer. His name is Ian, and he should be great at making music for us for the next 15 years. And on top of that, he seems like an upstanding gentleman. Whoa, that guy looks like a nonsensical man who's definitely gonna be a great fit for our company. Good find, Paul. I'm the new CEO of RuneScape, and I want to make RuneScape 3, which is just going to be a renaming of RuneScape 2, but we use a different client now. A splendid idea indeed, Mark, who is not my brother. But can you believe it's already been more than a decade since 9/11? Paul, what are you doing here? You don't work here anymore. Stop mentioning 9/11. And class, that's how we got RuneScape 3, which is technically the 3rd version of RuneScape, but it's all the same game, so there you go. They're nothing. Jagex could have very easily used those milestones as chances to cash in on a little bit of extra money by releasing them as a form of expansion or as entirely new sequels. But they didn't do that, and they didn't do it when they made one of the biggest gameplay changes they ever made. You see, in 2011, Jagex got bored and decided to look at what other MMOs were doing, and I guess they came across 2 MMOs, World of Warcraft and Star Wars Galaxies, and they were like, what if we did what Star Wars Galaxies did and took World of Warcraft's combat system? Wouldn't that be swell? We should do that. RuneScape's combat system at the time was literally point, click, and just watch. That was it. That was the extent of it. And Jagex decided we're going to make it different to be better. And as we learned from Star Wars Galaxies, everyone hated it. But to play devil's advocate, it was really, really bad. But this huge change to RuneScape was released just like any other update, at no additional cost to the players. If we did have to pay for it, there would have been riots in the streets, so it's probably good that they didn't try and make money off of us back then. But with the exception of a few really egregiously bad updates, both versions of RuneScape's weekly updates have been generally well received and have kept the game fresh and alive. So are there any downsides to the constant update model versus expansions? Because it doesn't seem like it. Yeah, there are a few trade-offs. When updates come out weekly, it means it's extremely rare that any massive update will come out all at once. You're much more likely to see epic storylines spread out across multiple updates, which could take months, or more likely years, and in some cases with RuneScape, decades to finish. And large land masses will be released, but they'll get added to more slowly over time. The only kind of new content that RuneScape gets that really drops all at once are skills and raids. And these are both great pieces of content to get all at once, and they generate a lot of hype, but it's nothing compared to the hype generated by expansions. When an expansion 2 or 3 years in the making is finally dropping, it gets everyone in the community together to play it and to explore it for days and weeks on end. It creates a sense of community and bonding that MMOs should always have, and it's the best part of expansions by far. And while RuneScape has some of that, you're more likely to just have a surge on release day and not much afterwards because there'll just naturally be less to explore. This isn't me hating on the developers, it's just a consequence of the update cycle they use. I mean, I have extremely fond memories of updates coming to RuneScape when I played in the early 2000s, but I don't really have the memories of me and my friends all rushing on after school to look at a new update or to play it for days straight. We would just do that because we were addicted, but never because of an update. Whereas my friends who played World of Warcraft would do that all the time, especially when Cataclysm came out, which is when a lot of my friends started playing. And I said Cataclysm was a bad expansion, and it still got all that hype. That's just how expansions work. They're just hype manufacturers, and that's great. Expansions will just feel like these unified, cohesive experiences, like a standalone game that is on the back of everything the MMO has built. And that's just something the constant update model can't replicate. There is one last major thing that the constant update cycle has going for it that expansions don't. It keeps the game intact. The old school RuneScape that released in 2013 is vastly different from the one that people play now, but the heart of the game is still there. If you create a new character, your early game and mid-game adventure is going to be largely similar, meaning nostalgia remains for the players who want it, and the new player experience is just as good as it was back in the day, and yeah, it was better back in the day. I have a video about it, go watch it. RuneScape 3 is night and day compared to what came out over 2 decades ago, but the core of the game is still the same. You still train skills and grind and fight weird bosses. So while it's all very different, it's still RuneScape. And because expansions keep having to raise the stakes and often to fit new designs have to change core mechanics, they are just much less likely to be able to survive as long with the heart of the game still there. And that's all on top of the fact that players don't have to pay $60 to have the privilege of paying a monthly fee to have the privilege of using microtransactions just to enjoy your game to the fullest. I really believe that the expansion model exists now just because it's the way things have always been done. And it was great back in the early days of MMOs. I truly believe that. But because MMOs are constantly online and all these changes stack over time, the expansion model is getting worse and worse with each passing year. And we have proof with old school RuneScape and RuneScape 3 that the constant update model works. My light went out. So if you're an MMO developer, like, I don't know, Blizzard, maybe if you release a classic version of your game, don't just rerun expansions, but consider making updates to the version everyone likes. Maybe. Just an idea. And that's all I have to say on the matter. Expansions are bad. If you made it this far into the video, you clearly are insane, and I will be having you arrested. So comment wee woo to make everyone know that the cops are coming. Making long form videos like this would not be possible without my Patreon supporters, so I want to take a quick moment to shout all of them out. First of all, an extremely big shout out to the members of my tier. Those people are John Sexum, Kuna Bazi, Hooli, Suede Oxford, a hobo with a spork, and Paradox. You guys are insane. I hope you're all okay mentally. Another shout out to my executive milk producers, a fellow MMO YouTuber Arahad, Wait Never Mind, Fantastic Penguin, Loon Master, Charlie, Kyle Fairburn, Siesta, Samurai Sussy, Mia IRL, Jepperite, K4S Silver, Omega Onion, Josh, Live Fast Sail Slow, Jamie, and Light. Their name's actually pronounced Liet, but you know, it's whatever. And last but certainly not least, my milk producers. Their names are all on the screen right now, and they're all wonderful people. Except for you, Travis. I know what you did, and you thought you'd get away with it. Thank you again to all of those people. If you'd like to support, you certainly don't have to, but you can at the link in the description.